Welcome back everyone to our channel where narratives aren't just recounted, they're deeply felt. If you champion empathy, justice, and truth, you've found your community. We often hear that time mends all wounds. But what if the hurt is constantly resurfaced in daily moments that most overlook? Racism doesn't always manifest as a loud roar with burning crosses or hateful slurs. Sometimes it's a silent whisper through avoidance, unspoken assumptions, and missed opportunities. Some argue, things are better now, why dwell on racism? Others counter that its very subtlety makes it more insidious than ever. Where do you stand on this crucial issue? Before we delve into Evelyn's profound story, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Your engagement empowers us to amplify genuine voices, raw realities, and candid conversations. Every click matters and every story holds weight. Now let's begin. What would you do if the very haven you painstakingly built became a place where you were treated as an outsider? The evening was meant for tranquility, a reprieve after a day where Evelyn Carter's muscles felt like lead. The scent of garden soil clung to her palms, and her knees ached from hours spent cultivating flowers for a neighborhood she believed she belonged to. The Savannah, Georgia air had softened into a gentle gray as she guided her sedan onto the winding road to her gated community. All she craved was the embrace of her recliner, a warm bowl of chicken stew, and the faint hum of her granddaughter upstairs. But before she reached her driveway, a sense of unease settled. Two patrol cars, their black and white exteriors stark, idled at her entrance, blocking the gate like sentinels. No sirens, no flashing lights, just the heavy, silent presence of authority, as if the very atmosphere had shifted. Evelyn slowed, a frown creasing her brow, confusion pricking at her chest. Initially, she suspected a break-in, perhaps a neighbor in distress. But as she drew nearer, an officer stepped forward, hand raised, halting her as if she were an intruder. "Stay in the vehicle, ma'am." His voice was sharp, cutting through the night. Evelyn slowly lowered her window, leaning out, her voice calm yet firm. "Officer, this is my home. I'm just trying to get inside." "You live here?" The words weren't a question but a challenge. "I've lived here for over a decade," Evelyn replied, maintaining her composure even as her heart quickened. "I planted half the trees you see on this street myself. My name is on the deed on the plaque by that gate. You can check." The second officer, taller, older, with a jaw like stone, emerged from behind the cruiser. He remained silent, but his hand hovered near his belt, fingers grazing his holster. Evelyn could discern his nameplate under the faint street lamp glow. Sergeant Douglas Keene. The younger officer, Delaney, glanced toward the security camera above the iron gate but made no move to check the feed. "We got a call about suspicious activity near this property," Keene finally stated, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized Evelyn from her headscarf to her worn sneakers. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Suspicious activity?" she repeated, a trace of disbelief in her voice. "I was coming home from the park. I volunteer there every Thursday. There's nothing suspicious about going home." Delaney stepped closer, extending his hand. "Mind showing us your ID?" Evelyn moved slowly, deliberately, reaching into her bag on the passenger seat. "Not a problem, but you're going to feel real foolish when you see the address." She handed over her license, her name and address clearly printed, matching the home just beyond the gate. The two men studied it, yet they still didn't move. The silence thickened, like the air before a summer storm, heavy with unspoken tension. Evelyn tapped her fingers on the window frame, her patience fraying, but her composure unwavering. "You can check the plaque, check the mailbox, check the gate records. This is my home." Before either officer could respond, the creak of a door broke the standoff. From the side porch, Evelyn's daughter Monica stepped out, her hospital scrubs catching the dim light. "Mom," she called, her voice slicing through the uneasy quiet. Behind her, Evelyn's 16-year-old granddaughter, Leah, appeared barefoot, phone in hand, filming as she instinctively understood something was wrong. "That's my mother," Monica said, her voice sharp and protective as she approached the gate. "She lives here." "What exactly is the problem?" The officers exchanged a glance, their rigid posture softening but only slightly. Keene returned the license, his expression unreadable. "We were just responding to a report. Doing our job." "By blocking her driveway?" Monica's eyes burned, her voice low but unshakable. They offered no answer. They simply turned, walked back to their cars and drove away into the darkness, leaving Evelyn behind the wheel, watching the slow crawl of the gate as it opened. She drove through without a word. But the quiet within her chest was not peace. It was something else, something heavier. Because she knew this wasn't just about tonight. It was about the fact that even after years of community roots, service and familiarity, a single call and a quick glance could erase it all. And that night, staring at the untouched bowl of stew in her kitchen, Evelyn Carter knew this wasn't over. It was only the beginning. What lingers isn't the flashing lights or the inquiries. It's the way a single moment can make home feel like a place you no longer recognize. Evelyn Carter found no sleep that night. She lay awake, tracing the ceiling fan's endless spin, her thoughts circling faster than the blades. The home she had toiled her entire life to maintain. The place of birthday celebrations, blooming gardens and her granddaughter's first steps, suddenly felt alien. Not because the walls had changed but because something within her, an unspoken heavy weight, had shifted. When dawn finally arrived, soft and muted through her curtains, Evelyn rose, though her body felt as if it carried bricks. She moved to the kitchen, brewed coffee and sat at the table, hands wrapped around the mug, staring at the footage from the previous night. Monica had sent her the video. Leia's recording of the two officers, the raised hand to halt her, the questions that weren't questions, the quiet insinuation that she didn't belong in a place she had called home for over a decade. Monica shuffled into the kitchen, hair tied up, still in her robe. She looked at her mother, her face softening. "Did you sleep at all?" Evelyn shook her head slowly. "Not really. Kept thinking about how quickly it all happened. How easy it was for them to see me as someone else. Someone I'm not." She sipped her coffee, her hands trembling slightly. "If I didn't have this video, would anyone even believe it? Or would they say I was exaggerating?" Monica cracked an egg into a pan, the sizzle filling the heavy silence. "What are you going to do?" she asked without looking up. Evelyn stared at the footage again, her jaw tightening. "First thing, I'm calling the neighborhood patrol company. They're the ones who made the call. And they never even checked the gate camera. They just assumed." By 8:30 a.m., Evelyn was on the phone with South Shore Patrol, the private firm her homeowners association paid to monitor the gates and streets at night. The woman who answered sounded cheerful at first, her tone shifting quickly when Evelyn gave her name. After a brief hold, a man's voice came on the line, low and measured. "Mrs. Carter, this is Andrew Folsom, head of operations. I understand there was an incident yesterday evening. I was about to reach out to you." "An incident?" Evelyn's voice was calm but with a sharp edge. "Two officers blocked me from entering my own home, hands hovering near their guns. All because someone decided I was suspicious. And your patrol team didn't even bother to confirm who I was before calling in the cavalry." There was a pause. "Our team member reported seeing someone near the gate after dark in work clothes. And you mean me?" Evelyn cut in, her voice firm now. "The same woman who's lived here a decade? The same woman who pays your invoices through my HOA dues every month?" He didn't see a neighbor. He saw something else. And you know it. "I understand your frustration," Folsom said carefully. "We're reviewing procedures to make sure something like this doesn't happen again." "There's no relationship to salvage," Evelyn replied coldly. "As of today, I'm pulling my support for your contract. You can explain to the HOA why one of their longest-standing residents wants nothing to do with you anymore." She hung up before he could respond. Monica, sitting at the table, raised her eyebrows. "That's it, that's the start," Evelyn said, sliding her phone aside. "Next, I'm calling the HOA board. I want every name on record. I want them to explain why a firm they hired treats residents like trespassers." By noon, word had already begun to spread. A neighbor texted Monica. "Saw what happened last night. Was that your mom? It's already on Facebook." Another friend of Evelyn's sent her a link, a 92-second clip of the encounter, shared by someone who had picked it up from Leia's Instagram story. The caption read, "Elderly woman blocked from her own driveway. Guess why?" Evelyn scrolled through the comments. A mix of outrage and disbelief, but also a few voices questioning whether the video told the whole story. She put the phone down, exhaling slowly. "They're going to make this into something it's not," she murmured. Leia sat on the couch, scrolling on her phone. "It's already everywhere, Grandma. TikTok, Facebook, even someone on Twitter posted it. My friend Sasha says people are talking about calling the local news. Evelyn rubbed her temples. I didn't want to become a story. I just wanted to go home. That evening, a knock at the door interrupted the uneasy quiet. Evelyn opened it to find a woman standing on the porch, her white-gray hair neatly tucked into a bun, a plastic container of peach cobbler cradled in her arms like a fragile offering. Her cardigan sleeves were pushed up, her expression somewhere between nervous and ashamed. Mrs. Carter, the woman said softly. I'm Margaret Holloway. I live 2 streets over. Can we talk for a moment? Evelyn stepped aside wordlessly, allowing her in. Margaret placed the container on the kitchen counter, her hands trembling slightly. I need to tell you something, she began. I was the one who called the patrol company last night. Monica stood from her chair, her arms folding tightly across her chest. You what? Margaret's voice cracked. I looked out my window and saw someone at your gate. It was getting dark and I didn't recognize you. I panicked. I told myself I was just looking out for the neighborhood, but I know how it must have looked. I didn't mean for it to become what it became. You didn't recognize me? Evelyn's voice was quiet but heavy. I've been at every block party for the last 5 years. I volunteered at the park. I've waved to you and your husband a dozen times. Margaret's face flushed deep red. I wasn't thinking clearly. And maybe I was thinking something I didn't want to admit. I don't want to believe it, but maybe it was more than just a mistake. Leah appeared in the doorway, her phone still in hand. Her voice was calm, but it carried the sting of truth. You panicked because she's black, didn't you? Margaret's eyes welled. I'm not proud of it. But maybe yes. I came here because I had to say it. I'm sorry. She left quietly, the cobbler untouched on the counter. The front door clicked shut, leaving a silence so deep that Evelyn could hear the hum of the refrigerator behind her. She stood there for a long moment, her jaw tight. That's 2 apologies in 24 hours, she said finally, her voice low, almost to herself. 2 explanations for why I don't get to feel at home in the house I worked for. She didn't touch the cobbler. Didn't touch her coffee. That night, as the video crossed 500,000 views and messages poured in from strangers, some supportive, some skeptical, Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the shadows crawling across the wall. She thought the incident would fade, but she was wrong. The weight of doubt had only just settled, and what came next would shake her world far beyond her driveway. Sometimes the quietest rooms hold the loudest decisions, the kind that can either heal a wound or make it impossible to close. Evelyn Carter sat in her living room, the evening news murmuring faintly from the television, though she wasn't listening. She hadn't been able to focus on anything for days. Not the roses in her front yard that were beginning to wilt. Not the sound of Leah's laughter in the background as she FaceTimed a friend. Not even the soft creak of the rocking chair she usually found comfort in. What kept playing in her mind instead was the silence that followed every conversation. Margaret Holloway's apology, the clipped words of Andrew Folsom from the patrol company, even Monica's steady, unwavering voice telling her to keep calm and think strategically. That silence didn't feel empty. It felt loaded, like the quiet moments right before a storm makes landfall. The HOA board meeting was set for Sunday evening. Evelyn hadn't planned on attending, but Monica had been insistent. You've already been made into the center of this story, Mom. If you're not there to speak for yourself, they'll speak for you and they'll twist it. So on Sunday, Evelyn dressed carefully, not for show but with intention. A navy cardigan, pressed slacks. Nothing flashy, but nothing anyone could label as unfitting or provocative. She didn't want them to find excuses to ignore her words. Monica drove her to the community clubhouse. Leah rode along silently, headphones in, scrolling through her phone, but not truly seeing the screen. The meeting room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old carpet, the kind of sterile scent that never felt truly clean. About 20 residents were scattered among folding chairs, some avoiding Evelyn's gaze, others offering stiff nods. At the front stood Greg Stanford, the HOA president, a tall man with slicked back hair and a smile that never seemed to reach his eyes. He cleared his throat as Evelyn entered, his hands gripping the edge of the plastic table where he stood. We'll be moving quickly through today's agenda, Greg said, his voice measured. But given the attention recent events have brought to Shoreline Heights, we will be opening the floor for discussion at the end. Evelyn could feel the weight of a dozen glances on her. She sat quietly, listening as they droned on about pool maintenance, landscaping bids, and the upcoming neighborhood barbecue. It felt surreal, the disconnect between what her family was enduring and the triviality of these bullet points. When Greg finally gestured for open comments, she didn't wait for the polite pause. She stood immediately, her chair scraping against the tile. "I want to make something clear," Evelyn began, her voice steady but carrying the firmness of a hammer striking a nail. "I'm not here to point fingers or start a shouting match, but I am here because what happened outside my own gate last week wasn't just a mix-up. It was a message, intentional or not, that I don't belong where I live, that I can be questioned, treated as a threat in a place I've called home for 10 years. A few heads turned away, their gazes dropping to their laps. Others met her eyes, some with sympathy, some with unease. "I worked my entire life to be here," Evelyn continued. "I've paid my dues, attended your meetings, volunteered at your events. But the second I was seen in work clothes after dark, I wasn't a neighbor anymore. I was a problem to be solved. And no one, not the patrol company, not the responding officers, not even this board, has explained why I should ever feel safe again, knowing how quickly I can be reduced to a suspicious person." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the overhead lights. Greg shifted, his jaw tightening as if he were forcing his professional smile back into place. "Mrs. Carter, we take these concerns seriously and I'm not asking for platitudes," Evelyn cut in, her tone sharpening just slightly. "I'm asking for action. Terminate the patrol company's contract. Demand accountability from the local department for their officers' conduct. And most importantly, start a real conversation about how neighbors see one another. Because if I can be treated this way, who's next? Who else has to prove they belong in the place they've built their life?" From the second row, a man raised his hand. He was broad-shouldered with graying hair and a soft, weathered face. "Name's David Hayes," he said, standing slowly. "My wife and I moved here 8 years ago. Different side of the neighborhood. I just want to say I've seen this kind of thing before. Not to me but to my brother-in-law. He's black. Every time he visits, someone calls the patrol on him. Even when he's walking the dog. I've complained to this board before but nothing changes. Mrs. Carter, you're not alone in this. I'll stand with you." A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. Some residents nodded subtly. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as if the air had grown too dense to breathe. Evelyn felt something loosen just slightly in her chest. Greg's smile faltered, his eyes scanning the room as if gauging which way the wind was blowing. "We'll be revisiting the patrol contract in our next closed session," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "And I'll personally reach out to the local department regarding proper procedures." It wasn't a promise, but it was a crack in the wall. After the meeting, as residents filtered out into the cool night air, a few lingered near Evelyn. Some offered quiet words of support. Others simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement. David Hayes approached her last, his expression earnest. "I teach at Clear Lake High," he said. "We hold leadership programs for our juniors every spring. Would you ever consider coming to speak about this? About resilience, about not staying silent?" Evelyn hesitated. She'd never pictured herself as someone who would stand in front of a room full of teenagers telling her story like it was a lesson. But something in David's eyes, the recognition, the belief that her experience could carry weight beyond her driveway, made her nod. "I'll think about it," she said softly. As she and Monica walked back to the car, the night felt different. The air was still heavy, but there was something stirring beneath it, like the faint shift in pressure before rain. Evelyn didn't feel safe yet, but she felt seen. And for the first time since that night at the gate, she wasn't sure she had to stand alone. Sometimes the danger isn't the strangers we fear. It's the neighbors who smile by day and whisper by night. In the weeks following the threatening note and the tense encounters, Evelyn Carter realized that silence wouldn't ensure her safety, nor would it protect Monica or Leah. The quiet tension in Shoreline Heights was no longer merely uncomfortable. It was corrosive, eroding the sense of community she had once believed this neighborhood promised. The easy path would have been to retreat, to pack bags and disappear for a while as Monica had suggested. But Evelyn knew that leaving wouldn't resolve anything. The same unspoken rules that had rendered her a stranger at her own gate would only resurface elsewhere. So she decided to stay. But staying meant more than just holding her ground. It meant finding a way to transform whispers into conversations and tension into understanding. The first step came when Brian Holloway, the high school teacher who had spoken quietly to Evelyn after the HOA meeting, called and asked her to speak at a student leadership program in Charleston. The school sought someone who could address resilience, standing tall when others tried to push you aside. Evelyn had never stood behind a podium before, but something within her told her this was where change could begin. Not in online arguments, but in the hearts of those still open to listening. The auditorium carried the faint scent of sawdust and pencil shavings, a smell that transported Evelyn back to her own school days. Dozens of students sat in neat rows, their faces curious yet guarded. They had seen her story online, some sympathetic, others skeptical. She began not with the video nor the police nor the note, but with her life before Shoreline Heights. She spoke of working nights as a home health aide, of saving for 10 years to purchase the house she now inhabited, of her belief that she had finally reached a place where her family could breathe without fear. But here's the truth, she said, her voice steady but warm. Safety doesn't just come from gates and patrols. It comes from neighbors who see each other as people first, not as problems to be solved or threats to be watched. And if we can't do that for each other, no gate will ever keep us safe. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn felt the room soften. A girl with braids and glasses raised her hand, her voice barely above a whisper. My mom stopped going to the park near our house because of the stairs. I think she feels like she doesn't belong there. Evelyn walked toward the edge of the stage, crouching slightly to meet the girl's eyes. Then we have to make sure the world she walks through feels less like a spotlight and more like a home. That's what I'm fighting for. Not just for me but for her and for you. When the session ended, several students lingered, thanking her quietly. One boy handed her a folded piece of notebook paper. Later, in her car, Evelyn unfolded it. It read simply, "Thank you for showing us how to stand without shouting." Back in Shoreline Heights, Evelyn decided to take another step, not in defiance but in presence. She finished the cedar planter she had left untouched for weeks, lined it with lavender and rosemary and placed it by her front porch. It wasn't merely decoration, it was a statement. Every morning thereafter she sat on her porch for a few minutes, coffee in hand, allowing neighbors to see her not as a headline or a video clip, but as herself. A mother, a woman who had worked for what she had, someone who belonged as much as anyone else. Slowly things began to shift. The patrol company that had once stood between her and her home was not reinstated, despite a handful of residents pushing for it. The HOA announced new elections and Evelyn's name was nominated for the board by 3 separate neighbors, 2 of whom she had barely spoken to before. She hadn't decided if she would accept, but the idea lingered. Perhaps the only way to truly mend what was broken was to hold the keys herself. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the streets in gold, Monica joined her on the porch. "You really think this will change anything?" she asked, sipping her tea. Evelyn looked down at the lavender, swaying gently in the breeze. Change isn't always loud. Sometimes it's as simple as letting people see you every day without fear. That's how bridges get built, one quiet, steady step at a time. For the first time in months, Evelyn didn't feel like she was merely surviving Shoreline Heights. She felt like she was shaping it, transforming her stand into something greater than defiance. A foundation for a different kind of home for everyone. Evelyn Carter's story commenced with a seemingly innocuous moment. A simple drive home after a long day, her boots worn, her hands still faintly scented with the day's toil. Yet that quiet evening in Shoreline Heights erupted into something far greater when 2 patrol cars blocked her driveway, treating her not as a returning neighbor, but as a stranger to be interrogated. Calm, measured, and unwilling to escalate, Evelyn endured the encounter with grace. But what followed proved this wasn't an isolated incident. It was a mirror held up to the fractures in her community and a test of how far one person can go to demand to be seen. In the ensuing days, Evelyn faced more than just flashing lights. She confronted doubt from neighbors, whispers that spread faster than truth, and the chilling weight of an anonymous threat left in her mailbox. The video her daughter Monica had recorded spread far beyond Shoreline Heights, drawing Evelyn into conversations she had never sought to lead, but could no longer abandon. And yet, even as the scrutiny intensified, allies emerged quietly at first, like Brian Holloway, who invited her to speak to his students, and Dolores Vines, who armed her with the tools to hold the system accountable. Evelyn's strength wasn't born from shouting or spectacle. It stemmed from her decision to remain present, even when silence would have been easier. She stood before her neighbors at tense meetings not to attack, but to challenge them to see the truth. Safety isn't built by gates nor by suspicion but by understanding and fairness. She stood before a room full of teenagers and shared the truth about resilience. Not as a hero, but as a woman who had simply grown weary of proving her right to exist in spaces she had worked hard to call home. She even stood on her own porch, morning after morning, coffee in hand, lavender swaying at her side, as a quiet act of defiance and belonging. Her story reminds us that racism and bias do not always roar loudly. Often they creep quietly through side glances, routine procedures, and unchecked assumptions. But Evelyn's journey shows that change doesn't always have to roar either. Sometimes it begins with choosing not to leave, choosing to keep showing up, and choosing to build something steady enough that others can step forward too. The lesson here is simple yet powerful. Your voice matters even when it shakes. Standing up for yourself, your family, and your dignity isn't just about the moment you're in. It's about those who will walk the same path after you. The systems that feel immovable often begin to shift, not because of the loudest outrage, but because of the quiet persistence of those who refuse to disappear. For everyone listening, ask yourself, where in your life are you choosing silence when your voice could build a bridge? Where can you transform suspicion into understanding, not just for yourself but for your community? If Evelyn's story teaches us anything, it's that true belonging isn't given. It's built day by day, even when the road feels uneven. If this story resonated with you, if it made you contemplate the kind of world we're shaping for ourselves and the next generation, then help us continue sharing stories like Evelyn's. Hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and become part of a growing community that believes every voice deserves to be heard. Your support keeps these stories alive and ensures that silence never wins.